Welcome to the Guided Podcast, where we support you to find the courage to listen and act. I'm Amanda Goolsby, and with me is
Ali Katz.
Let's get started.
This is Ali, and I am here today to share with you as many of the choice points as I can looking back so that together we can look at where I was guided to listen and act so that you can begin to see where you are also being guided to listen and act. My life wasn't easy. I felt really lonely. I felt really confused a lot of the time. Looking back now, it's pretty likely that I had some form of neurodivergence, but back then, we didn't know about neurodivergence. Socially awkward or not fitting in or having a really hard time making friends. I spent a lot of my childhood in books, reading books, and that was my escape. People would always say, wow, Alexis always has her nose in a book. And yeah, I always had my nose in a book because books made a lot more sense than people. And it was painful and confusing. The thing that was, I think, the most confusing for me was the discrepancy between the way people acted and the way that I could tell that they really were. And I couldn't reconcile that. So, my mom would be screaming at me about something and then seconds later pick up the phone, hello, as if nothing had happened. And I couldn't understand that. How could she be screaming at me so angry and then seconds later just pick up the phone as if nothing was wrong? I could tell that the way that my parents were acting out in the world was not the same as they were acting at home. At home, there was a tremendous amount of conflict, anxiety, stress, but they were really good at putting on a happy face, at making it look as if everything was just fine. And that was really confusing to me because it wasn't just fine. I knew it wasn't just fine. It was clearly not just fine. And of course, now I understand that they were saving face, that they were protecting their own self-image of themselves, that they were doing the best they could. But it was confusing. On top of that, my dad was a con artist. And of course, that was really confusing because he was my best friend. I loved my dad in the way that I think only little girls can love their dads. I just wanted to be daddy's little girl. And he wasn't around a lot. At least that was how it felt to me. He wasn't around enough. And I think my mom was protecting him. He was an alcoholic and an addict for the first 5 years of my life. And then he was on the road a lot for business. And I realize now that he was making the best choices he could, coming from one of the deepest victim mindsets and scarcity-based consciousnesses that I've ever known, in some ways. My dad was the kind of guy that everyone loved. He was gregarious, he was funny, but he was also racist. And he used his intelligence to get people to buy things that weren't actually good for them. He went to prison for it when I was in 5th grade. So again, this was very confusing because everybody loved my dad. I loved my dad. And yet, by all societal standards, he was a bad guy. And in some ways, really, of course, by my standards. How could I love a man who stole from others? How could that be okay? It's part of why I became a lawyer, because I needed to understand. I began reading the depositions from his trials when I was probably around 10, 11, 12 years old. They were fascinating. And I knew I'd be a lawyer after that. I really wanted to be a psychologist, actually, but my dad didn't respect psychologists. So I went to law school. And in so many ways, I went to law school to save my dad, to redeem our family name, to prove that we were not that. I was not that. I was not that. My dad should have been a lawyer, could have been a lawyer, but he had this very deep-seated belief that I can see now that his mother raised him poorly, and because his mother raised him poorly, that he'd had no choice but to make the choices he did. He had no choice but to become an addict and an alcoholic because he was neglected. Of course, she was also doing the best she could. She was a single mom, also married to an addict. It runs in the family, of course. She was an entrepreneur, his mother, back before there were mompreneurs. My grandmother was that. He was the youngest of 3 kids, and she was doing the best she could. It's a theme in my family. It's a theme in your family, too. We're all doing the best we can with the resources we have. In fact, we are the very first generation ever to have the resources to even be looking at these issues, to be looking at what we inherited, to be looking at the consciousness that was handed down to us so that we can heal it and transmute it. We have the time, energy, attention, and money, team resources. We have the tools. Our parents didn't have the same kinds of books to read or the holistic psychologist on Instagram sharing about trauma and helping us to understand what happened. Our parents were operating from survival and scarcity. Our grandparents even more so, and theirs before them even more than that, because that was the paradigm that we lived in. We just had to do what we could to live. And something has shifted when we were born. A lot shifted when we were born. I'm 49 years old, born in 1973. The entire monetary system was changing when I was born, from a gold-backed system to a credit-backed system. Oddly enough, my system, my internal system remembers this. I couldn't have possibly known. I was a baby, and yet my internal system remembers this shift happening. It's very likely that if you get in touch with the truth of who you are, why you're here, and what is yours to do, which this podcast is intended to support with, you will note that the time that you were born was very critical to what you are here to do in the world, to what you're actually here for. If you look at what was going on in the world's circumstances, you'll have some insight, you'll have some guidance about why you chose to be born during this time that you did. And I do believe that we all did choose to be born to the exact parents at the right time, at the exact time. I don't know about the right time, but the exact time that we did for the evolution of our soul. It took me a long time to get to this belief. It took me a long time to remember that I believe this. And it took me a long time to really understand it. So my hope is that what we transmit to you through this show will help you to understand it sooner than I did, because the sooner you understand it, the more intentionally you can live your life. The more you can make it through the troughs and the valleys of despair that will come, that are part of the human experience, that are likely part of your experience, or if they haven't been yet, will be. And you'll be able to make more sense of them, understand exactly what's happening and why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. Because when you can make sense of it, when you can make sense of your life, when you can make sense of what happened to you, you'll eventually realize if you haven't already, that it is truly happening for you. And you'll be able to transmute the victim consciousness that, for example, my dad had that led him to believe he needed to steal from people instead of serve people, into a victor consciousness that helps you to realize that you create reality with your choices. My dad could have gone to law school, of course. He could have changed the narrative that he had about his mother who neglected him, and therefore he needed to take drugs and steal to avoid the pain that he felt. But had he been willing or able or had the tools or the consciousness to feel that pain all the way through, he could have healed it. Had he done so, he probably wouldn't have died at 58. He probably wouldn't have passed on that trauma to me and my sister to heal, to do the work on in our own lives. He would have had a different life. He wouldn't have gone to prison. He would have served humanity in a way that he truly, I believe, wanted to. But he couldn't see the way. Whatever our parents were not able to heal in themselves gets handed down to us. One of my longtime partners, Craig, shared that with me, and it's always stuck and made so much sense. And I've seen it play out in my own life. Everything I was unable to heal, my children get to heal. The more work I do on myself to heal what I've inherited, the easier it is for them. The biggest gift I can give them is my own healing, and it's never too late. There were many, many, many times throughout their life. Currently, as I'm recording this, they are 20 and 23, and we are about to embark on a 10-day trip to Egypt together. It's big. We haven't traveled like this together before. There were many times throughout their life that I thought it was too late. I'd fucked it up. They were born when I was 25. I was just about to turn 26 when my daughter was born. I turned 26 3 weeks later, and my son was born when I was 29. I knew I would have both of them before I was 30. I've had many knowings throughout my life, uncertain if they're premonitions or self-fulfilling prophecies. Manifestation and action before I even knew what manifestation was. They were both born right on time, and I didn't even know what healing work was when they were born. I had no idea. So, of course, they were born with all of my unhealed wounds and traumas. And in fact, I can now see that they were born specifically, at least in the context of my life, to show me what needed to be healed, to show me the things that I could not possibly see in myself, but wow, I could see them clearly in them. And as their mom, I had a choice. I could either point at those things in them and make them wrong for them, as most of our parents do, or I could take full 100% responsibility and heal them right here. And heal them right here. And gratefully, thankfully, I was guided to do the healing work here rather than to dump it all in their lap. And not to say that they won't have their own healing work to do. Of course they will. And I take responsibility for what's mine. And model for them what's possible about how they can take responsibility as well. And make choices to be guided to see who they are, why they're here, and what's theirs to do. Separate from me, although completely, of course, intertwined because they chose to come through me and their dad. So I'm going to share my story with all of that context I just gave you. life wasn't easy for me growing up. It was confusing. My parents cared a lot about image, more about image than anything else, I think. We grew up in a home that was kind of the premier home on this corner in South Miami, the corner of Old Cutler and Ludlam, a very well-known corner. We were the premier home behind this rock wall at the corner of a neighborhood called Devonwood. It looked amazing on the outside. On the inside, it was falling down. When I would go downstairs at night, turn on the light, cockroaches would run everywhere. My parents were in way over their head when they bought it. They bought it to renovate. The renovations never quite got done before they got divorced and we had to move. I felt poor most of the time. They constantly fought over money, said we didn't have any money, and relatively speaking, we didn't compared to the very wealthy families that they were friends with. We grew up in the Jewish community of South Miami where people had a lot of money, but we didn't. At least that was the story. And yet somehow we always had a live-in nanny, and I always found my way to summer camp, sleepaway camp, and private school. But we shopped at Kmart for my clothes while my mom would take me shopping to the fancy stores where she would shop for her clothes, but I wasn't allowed to get anything because we didn't have any money. It was confusing. Money was very confusing. I now understand that because of the timing of my birth and the shift that was being made on a world level from the gold-backed economy and gold-backed money system to the debt-based money system, that I am karmically tied to the transformation of financial systems. And I first became aware that that would be the case. I must have been about 11 years old, and my mom had taken me to look at houses to buy, none of which we could afford, according to her. And we were in this one house, and it was a gorgeous house, and it had a swimming pool inside. And I remember saying, yes, I love this house. Let's get this one. And my mom said, we can't afford it. I said, what do you mean we can't afford it? I don't understand. Why don't we just sell our house and then we'll get this house? She said, well, our house is $250,000 and this house is $450,000. So first of all, let me just pause there for a moment. $250,000 and $450,000. Hearing that, I'm sure that you can just take into your own awareness, your own body, how relative everything is. Today, any house pretty much is $450,000. At least here in Boulder, you can't even get a house for $450,000. Maybe where you are, there's still houses that you could buy for $250,000 or $300,000. But the day of $150,000, $100,000, sub $100,000 houses is so far gone that to think of getting a mansion with an indoor pool for $450,000, well, you'd snap it up, right? But back then, $250,000 to $450,000 was a big gap, and $450,000 was a fortune, and we didn't have it. But I remember thinking, well, why don't we just get it? Why can't we just get it? And I said that to my mom, well, why can't we just get it? Why can't we just get that $450,000? And she said, well, it doesn't work that way. But here's the thing. It does work that way. I knew it when I was 11. It does work exactly that way. My mom just didn't understand how money works. And somehow at 11 years old, I did. And then, of course, as I grew, that understanding became shrouded by conventional wisdom. I can see now it wasn't wisdom at all. It was whatever is the opposite of wisdom, conventional teachings that taught me the ways of scarcity, taught me that money is not a renewable resource, that there isn't enough money. And it would take me until I built $2 million businesses and didn't know how to work with money because of the conventional teachings that I had learned in law school and then from the business world and from the Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey books that I bought, because I knew, part of being guided, I knew that one day I would be like Susie Orman. I remember going to the bookstore before I even knew who Susie Orman was. I remember going to the bookstore and looking for something. I'm looking for something, some sort of a teaching on money or something that would help me understand the world. I now realize I was looking for Susie Orman's books, Dave Ramsey's books. That's all that was out there at that time, financial literacy books. I was looking for financial literacy. But the literacy that they taught us is a lie. Sure, it's based in the economic structures that have been set up for us, but those economic structures that have been set up for us are not the economic structures that we want to choose. They're the economic structures that were created for us by a system that isn't in service to us. Just take that in for a minute. The economic systems that we are or have been, it's changing now. There's a massive shift on the horizon right now, right here. And for those of us that get it, wow, it's a huge opportunity. And for those that will stay stuck in the old paradigm, it's going to seem really confusing. And so my hope here is to help you make sense of it faster than I did. Because it took me from 11 years old knowing the truth and then getting deeply, deeply conditioned in the economic systems, even so far as to being an economic fellow, a John M. Olin economic fellow at Georgetown Law, and writing a paper on economics, deep conditioning about zero-sum games and being told that this is just how it is. But it's not just how it is. It's what we've created. But it is not just how it is. Our collective consciousness is what creates the economy. We create the economy. And so if it's just how it is, it's because we've agreed. Gratefully, enough people are awakening to see that we don't have to agree to how it is or how it's been. It took me until 2009, after I had achieved all of the heights of success, $1 million law practice, $1 million online training company, best-selling book, family financial and legal expert on TV, ALEXIS Martin Neely, and yet so unhappy, knowing that something was completely off. And then having the opportunity in a plant medicine journey to get to see exactly what it was. A plant medicine journey that I was guided to. Gratefully, I listened and had the courage to act, because I will tell you that ALEXIS Martin Neely was not interested in plant medicine. Resistant, to say the least. Judgmental, without question. This is back in 2009. Nobody was doing plant medicine. Today it's, ketamine and mushroom journeys. I mean, I'm seeing them advertised on like Eventbrite. But back then, ayahuasca? What's that? What's that? It's just something that people take to get high. That's what Alexis Martin Neely said. And yet, some deeper part of me, the part of me that I'm going to be sharing with you here on the podcast, the part of me that knew how to listen and act, said, yes, we're doing it. And I did. And in that journey, I saw the truth. I saw a world that works for everyone. I saw a world in harmony. I remembered the dream I had had as a child of world peace, of a world where why don't we all just get along? It seems so Pollyanna to say it, and yet it is what's true. Why don't we all just get along? We can choose that. Oh, right. Trauma, power and control dynamics, survival strategies, scarcity-based beliefs. We're here to heal it. We are here to heal it. We are here to heal it. It would take me walking away from everything that I had created and moving to a farm and filing bankruptcy to begin to unwind the patterns. I was terrified. What was I doing? What was I doing? Wait, what? I graduated first in my class from Georgetown Law. I was a John M. Olin Law and Economics Fellow. I worked at one of the best law firms in the country. Munger, Tolson, Olson, Charlie Munger's firm, Warren Buffett's personal lawyer. Almost slipped personal family lawyer in there. You'll hear more about that later. Warren Buffett's personal lawyer. I, who built million-dollar businesses. I, who wrote that best-selling book. I, who was living up to transmuting the karma of my parents, while at the same time so focused on the image, just like they were, and yet collapsing and crumbling inside. What was I doing to walk away from all of it and move to a farm and file bankruptcy? Well, the deeper part of me knew. It was the only way to unwind the patterns, the ego death, the heroine's journey, the call. Future episodes will deconstruct what happened and, of course, all of the things that needed to lead up to it to go from what I was to what I have become. I could just take a moment right now to offer that one that was so terrified, that part of me that did not want to go, and offer her right now some soothing, some care, and let her know that it's all okay. You're doing the right thing. You're on the right path. Keep going. Keep letting go. Keep surrendering. Keep trusting. Keep learning to feel your heart. You're unraveling deep patterns. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what healing was. I didn't know even what feeling was, for that matter. I had no idea. But some part of me did. I can look back now and know that every step of the way I was being guided. And if there's one thing that I have in spades, it is the courage to listen and act. And because of that, I was able to rebuild. I was able to rebuild on a new foundation and with a new awareness, and see through the lies that society had embedded into me and into my parents and into their parents before them, and recognize and remember who I am, why I'm here, and what's mine to do. I came here to heal the wounds that my parents couldn't. I came here to transmute the old paradigm in my own system, the power and control structures that my own ancestors were subject to and survived through. Wow, they did an amazing job, because I'm here now with you. able to be having this conversation, a conversation they couldn't have. They didn't have the time, energy, attention, money, team resources, or the tool, the consciousness to do it. They did the best they could. And it is my job as the evolution of them to take it one step further so that my children can take it one step further, so that their children can take it one step further. Because ultimately, the only thing that lives is that which can come into harmony. That's it. Everything else must die. We all die. These physical forms all die, but our consciousness lives. And all that can ultimately live is that which is in harmony with ourselves, each other, and the planet. And so how will I contribute to that during my lifetime? That's the question I get to ask. How will I contribute to that future harmony with myself, with each other, with the people in my life, and with the planet? How will I contribute to that? Because that is all that survives ultimately. That is all that thrives ultimately. That is all that lives ultimately. Everything else dies. That's what my guidance tells me. And so every day I get to ask the question of what inside of me is creating anything that is not that. What inside of me gets to be transmuted right here in my body through my life experiences and healed, alchemized, so that my children and their children and their children, generations into the future, will live with a different imprint than what I had, without the confusion that I had, without the dissonance that I had. That's what we're creating. That's what we're creating. That's why we're here, I believe. That's what my wisdom tells me. And I'm here sharing this story with you so that perhaps the part of you that feels lost and afraid and confused, or is right in the middle of it and doesn't yet realize that it is all happening for you, can get the reminder now, more quickly. Because when I was there and I kept hearing the message to remember, it's all happening, remember, it's all happening, remember, it's all happening for you. All I wished for was more guides, more people sharing their own stories, helping me to see something different than what I was seeing. And some of them did. And I listened and I read. Danielle Laporte helped me a lot. My mentors, my teachers. There weren't a lot of them, but the ones who were able to show me the way, Jason Gaddis, back home to myself, Lara Irwin, Kelly Notaris, the ones that could show me the way back to my own heart. Dr. J, my network chiropractor in Boulder, who was able to help me see that there was a massive energetic block between my heart and my head that got to be healed so that my heart and my head could be in alignment, working together. These guides, I don't know if I would have made it without them. And so I hope to be a guide for you. I hope to be a guide for you. And in the next episode, I am going to share with you the various choice points. That was what this episode was supposed to be about, but I was guided to take you back before the choice points occurred, to give you a greater context of my life. And so I listened. Just to catch you up to where I am now. As I think I mentioned earlier in the episode, I am 49 years old. I am in my Chiron return. I am about to leave on a 10-day trip with my children to Egypt with 200 other people on 2 ships with the Daybreaker crew. I am likely going to be revisiting any last remnants of my insecurities around people who are wealthier than me and cooler than me, because pretty much everybody on the boat is that. At least it seems that way from here. Perhaps on the other side, when I really get to know them, I'll see how awesome and same we all are. But right now, all I can feel is some pretty big distance that feels a lot like high school. Even though this year my company will do 10 million in revenue, we have 500 lawyers who are trained in my heart-centered counseling-based methodology for estate planning. The methodology that I first dreamed of in 2007 and nearly walked away from when I moved to the farm because I didn't know how I could do it. And it turns out that I just needed to do a whole lot of healing before I could. And I stuck with it. And now the integrated whole version of me, integrating my mind and my heart, my body and my soul, is here. And although sometimes I still think of her as she is running this $10 million company as a CEO, the CEO that I had to learn to be, because I did not know what it meant to be a CEO of a $10 million company. Of course, how could I? How would I have? I haven't had any mentors for that. I haven't seen anybody doing that in a way where I could say, hey, show me. A couple of the men that I've reached out to for support provided me with anything but that. Maybe I'll tell those stories at some point. I've gotten to see a couple of women doing it the way that I want to, a couple of women in the Unicorn Club. And I've gotten to watch and learn from them. And I still haven't seen anything that is spot on. I don't see anybody instituting a share the wealth economy in their companies where they're building not just for them, but for us that is the team and the clients. I haven't seen anybody building to exit in a way I want to exit, to a co-op structure rather than to private equity, or I haven't seen anybody that has bootstrapped the way that I have. There's a couple. They're much younger than me, and I'm still looking to see what I can believe, because I have to see what's true before I can take it all the way in. And I'll let you know that too, by the way, in this podcast, how to check out if what you're seeing is true. Because there's a lot of surface bullshit out there. Of course, I know that from my own dad. And I know that from the past 15 years of buying into a lot of the bullshit and then having to learn the hard way that it was bullshit. And I think that's part of the reason that I am doing this podcast with Amanda. And this is my solo episode. You'll meet Amanda in her solo episode, and then you'll hear the two of us in our joint episodes. And she's 15 years younger than me, so she's got a different consciousness. And over the past 6 to 9 months now that we've lived together, although we're not currently living together, but we got to live together for 6 to 9 months and travel together and have some amazing experiences together, where I got to see she's the real deal. She's the real deal. And I have her on the show with me to make sure that what I'm sharing with you is also the real deal, that I don't hide, because she's been living with me, working and not working in my company. She's not on my payroll. Most of the people in my life these days are in some way either working with me or on my payroll. That's a whole thing that I mostly love. But she's not. In fact, she's resisted me hiring her. I've really wanted to because she's amazing, but she wants to retain her autonomy. And it's part of why I'm doing this podcast with her. I've asked myself the question for a long time, what is my podcast going to be? Who am I going to do it with? And then Amanda showed up and we had this conversation about how we've each been guided at each step of our life. And I said, oh, we need to do this podcast together. It's called Guided, the courage to listen and act. And she said, yes. And so here we are. So Amanda's going to keep me honest, and I'm going to keep her honest, of course, too. And in the next episode, I am going to share with you the choice points that got me here. All the choice points that led from ALEXIS MARTIN NEELY. Whenever I say ALEXIS MARTIN NEELY, I hear the Today Show host saying,
ALEXIS MARTIN NEELY is a lawyer and also the author of a book called Wear Clean Underwear, a fast, fun, friendly guide to legal planning for busy parents. ALEXIS, good morning.
Every time I hear that, ALEXIS MARTIN NEELY, she was a thing. And all of the choice points that led from becoming that thing, that product of society. She was beautiful and amazing and smart and sharing a big message. But it was actually really a small message because it came just from my mind. And it was not truly deeply connected to my heart. I mean, in some ways it was, of course, because it's always been connected, and yet there was this disconnect. So all of the choice points from being that to untangling, unwinding, and becoming Ali Shanti, and then ultimately the integrated whole that is here today, Ali Katz. Well, I'm going to have my next episode be about that, and then maybe there's another episode that's just about the choice points of the integrated whole, the who I am now. But for now, I'm going to close this episode and say thank you. Thank you for being here. If you love the show so far, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe on your wherever you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and spread the word. Share it with friends who are also on a path of awakening, who are also unwinding and untangling, who are also learning to listen to the guidance that is always here for us. I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.